I can remember as a boy looking out of the back end of that warehouse down on the street below and the river beyond it, thinking that Nashville was a huge place, a metropolis. Couldn't imagine there could be a bigger place anywhere.
In the first half of the 20th century, Nashville underwent remarkable changes. We went from river travel to trains and planes, from electric streetcars to automobiles. Nashville had grown into a banking giant and a center of manufacturing. Music was taking center stage, and more changes were on the way in the next 3 decades. The expansion of the city, the growth of the music industry, the civil rights movement, the interstate highway system, urban sprawl, Opryland, all part of what made Nashville what it is today. Our city's photographers captured Nashville's journey from the relative calm of the 50s through the turbulent 60s to a city finding its way in the 70s. Here are your pictures and your stories in Nashville, the 20th Century in Photographs, Volume 3. Still photography has the power to capture a moment. A moment that might only last a fraction of a second. But because of our ability to catch light on film, this moment can have an impact for decades. This impact can be on our soul or our heart, on our city, on a people, or on the world. Between the mid-50s and the mid-70s, Nashville's citizens caught many such moments on film.
Photographs have such an impact on people's memory. They become more powerful than books, I think, because photos capture a moment and they can linger in our minds forever.
Downplayed the whiny steel guitar sound, upplayed background singers, strings, sweetening the sound. And that was the Nashville sound.
Radio stations across the nation embraced the new sound and the money started rolling in. The performers were not the only ones who benefited, as the success of the music industry brought thousands of jobs to the city. The economic impact was enormous. The music business was booming as Nashville moved into the 60s, and more change was on the way. Integration, interstates, urban sprawl, all part of Nashville's progress, all when we return.
Gosh, the 60s was an influx of 70 million baby boomers all of a sudden coming out of this sheltered 50s life, and they wanted change and they wanted to be in charge. That's basically what the 60s was all about. It's like taking a 10-year roller coaster, was the 60s. I went through every emotion possible.
Some of the most notable images in our city's history come from the youth movements and the unrest of the 60s. Brave students integrating downtown lunch counters, uncertain parents walking their children to integrated classrooms. Many of these photographs are shocking and can remind us of a time that was hurtful to many. They can also serve as a reminder of how brave we can be, how trying times can help a city reveal its true character and become stronger, because of the experience.
It's a kind of embarrassment.
I think of several images from the Nashville days of people being arrested on Church Street, trying to go into the stores that sat right where the public library sits today. In fact, the Civil Rights Room in the public library hovers over the spot where all of that drama took place. That symbolically, to me, has always seemed quite appropriate.
These photos of the brave students offering no resistance in the face of terrible opposition helped turn the tide of public sentiment in their favor. Perhaps the most famous images came on April 19, 1960, in the wake of the bombing of City Councilman Z. Alexander Luby's house.
It was something that I guess, if I can use the word, the enemy thought that this might put an end to it, to let you know that, okay, we're going to bomb this man's house and we can do the same to you. But it actually built a fire. And not only were the students upset and angry about it, the community as a whole, not just the black community, the white community was really upset about it, because Z. Alexander Luby was one of what you might call one of your favorite attorneys amongst blacks and whites. He was a very powerful attorney. And so the whole Nashville community was upset about that. So the march actually started at TSU.
The famous march from the TSU campus past Fisk and up Capitol Hill to the Metro Courthouse.
The Fisk students joined in at Pearl High. The principal was at the front door, which is on 17th Avenue, and he was saying that my students are not leaving. Well, the president of the student body went down and was entertaining the principal while the students were going out the back door, and they joined in with the Fisk students and made that march. We were three abreast, walking down in a silent march down Jefferson.
That serpentine line of students marching in orderly fashion, silently.
And not saying a word, not even talking to the person next to you. And so we finally made our way to downtown. And people got out of their cars, and there were people who were working who stood back and looked like, what is going on? Didn't know about the bombing. And all they saw was this long line of students silently marching. And so we had not only Tennessee State, American Baptist, Fisk University, Pearl High. I'm sure that there were people from Vanderbilt, Scarrett, Peabody that also marched downtown. And so there was a very large number of people downtown.
That picture always sticks in my mind, and indeed the students standing face to face with Mayor West when Diane Nash asked him if he thought it was right that black people could shop in stores but not eat at their restaurants, and the mayor saying, "Young lady, I have to say in all honesty, I don't believe that's right." That was a momentous occasion that still sticks in memory.
On that April day, Nashville banner photographer Vic Cooley captured C.T. Vivian, Bernard Lafayette, Diane Nash, and all of the other protesters standing tall next to Mayor West. It is one of the most recognizable photographs of the Nashville movement. Many credit Mayor West for giving executive approval to the civil rights movement in the city. It was truly a turning point in our city's history.
And so Diane Nash and that rather polite confrontation, to me, speaks worlds about what Nashville was able to do. Every time I look at the film and review it, I grow more proud that I was able to have lived through that time. Nashville, I think, has a unique place in civil rights history. I would say I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of Nashville as a whole, in spite of the fact, we had to deal with some issues. Because Nashville actually probably transitioned into the, quote, new age of human rights, I guess, in much better shape than most cities. And so I really think that's due to the fact that we had Meharry, Fisk, and Tennessee State.
Change is always difficult, no matter how beneficial in the long run.
And difference in the way we were treated during and after the civil rights era. As a kid, I would not be able to articulate it well, but I could feel the sense of it. How people treated us differently, more like customers rather than, an inconvenience. It was really interesting to see that.
There was another shift in the city in the early 60s that would bring prosperity and convenience to
the river, but the interstate cuts it off, and now we have, of course, the football stadium down there on the riverfront. The interstates certainly made transportation easier, but at a cost.
The integration of the interstates into the city was difficult for many, but it also brought new economic opportunities. Warehousing and transportation businesses began to locate in Nashville. The improved transportation also meant new chances for musicians to make money. For many years, the music of Nashville had been carried over the airwaves of WSM, but making additional money by touring was very difficult before the days of the interstates.
These guys would travel in a car with a bass inside or a bass on top. It was not air conditioned, and they were two-lane highways, and the Opry insisted that you be there 26 weeks out of the year or they'd throw you off the Opry. Vic Willis, that was in the Willis Brothers, Oklahoma Wranglers, they would be in Los Angeles and have to drive all the way back to make a Saturday night. Some of them, like Ira Lubin, didn't make it, These guys worked all the time, and they're the unsung heroes.
It was not an easy life. All your band members packed together, trying to sleep in the car. There were no motels back then. You pretty much had fans' houses you could stop at and get a meal, maybe. It was not easy, and all of that kept your touring limited. That plus the fact that if you were a country artist on the Grand Ole Opry, you were required to be back in Nashville to play the Opry on Saturday night, or every other Saturday night. So you couldn't go too far afield. You'd go to Paducah, or Louisville, or Atlanta. But after the development of the tour bus and the interstate system, then you could really rock out. Nashville happens to be located within 500 miles of something like 75% of the population of the United States. It's very central. When interstates come along, if you look at a map, they come into Nashville like spokes on a wheel. It's very convenient to tour out of Nashville, and the country music business teaches the world how to tour by inventing the customized tour bus, which is invented in Nashville. And now rock and roll acts tour this way, R&B acts tour this way, hip hop acts tour this way. Now everybody tours this way, but Nashville is the one that invented this method of touring.
The interstate system allowed average Nashvillians to branch out as well. More and more activity was moving to the suburbs, and cars were becoming an essential part of our life. Cars offered convenient access to shopping, larger suburban lots, and a new form of entertainment for teens, the driveway combo.
If you were of dating age, there were driveway combos, is what we call them. You could hear them all over town the weekends. There were dances everywhere. There'd be a band playing at somebody's house here and one over here playing at this house. They were great. I mean, they played all the twist and shout stuff, the Isley Brothers stuff. I mean, you could just roll the window down and listen and then take off. Everybody went every weekend, somewhere. There was a combo. I had friends in them. There was a group called the Charades, and when the psychedelic stuff came in, they had to go with the flow, so they changed their name to the Lemonade Charades to be a little more, a little more fruity and a little more flowery and that kind of thing. There were the Saturns that were out there. Another friend of mine led a group called the Exotics. And there was a group that had a black singer. That was a big deal. You know, hey, they got Tack Taylor. He's singing with them. Let's go see the Fairlanes. I've got a little diary at home I happened to write back in the end of the 60s, and I had just barely gotten married, and my wife was upstairs trying to do something. She was at Peabody College, and she couldn't, there was a combo 2 blocks down and one 4 blocks away, and she had to go to another room and shut the door. That was so loud. It was just a wonderful time.
By the late 60s and
we went to Centennial Park and had a huge, huge tent there and had lunch, a country Southern style lunch. And I remember Phyla Ha, who was on TV at one time and who has owned various places of bed and dining. And she prepared the lunch and served that huge number of people.
It was really remarkable to see people literally from all over the world coming to Nashville to help celebrate America's independence for a United Nations meeting and playing tourist in Music City, USA.
much had changed for Nashville 3/4 of the way through the 20th century. Major social progress was made. The excitement of downtown moved out to the suburbs, and so had the heart of country music. More affordable air travel and the convenience of the interstate highway system had nearly brought an end to passenger train service. But the 20th century and the changes it would bring was not over yet. Union Station finds a new life and a new purpose. The Ryman returns to its former glory. Downtown returns to prominence. A goddess moves to town. Performing arts and professional sports, all in the next installment of Nashville, the 20th Century in Photograph.